Hey everybody, Riot Mort here, back with Riot Kent. We're back doing a real patch rundown, the first real patch of Neon Knights 12.5. Kent, how you doing?
I am doing well. Very excited to talk about this very, very big patch and play some TFTs. Yeah.
Yeah. So obviously we launched Neon Knights. Balance was a little rough. We launched a B patch, fixed some of the things. Generally, it's Friday right now when we're filming this. Generally, what we're seeing is a much healthier meta. Certainly not perfect, but a lot more comps succeeding at this point. And so then we have 12.5, which obviously we're trying to get even more comps to be successful, more things playable. And then at most we'll have 12.5B. We'll talk about that later. But basically, this is a big month-long patch for us. So, and it is the first patch after, the launch, trying to adjust the things that we need to adjust.
Yeah. Our goals with this was to open up as many different carries and ways to play as possible so that because it's such a long patch, all of you have a lot of time to experiment and try out all the different carries. And hopefully we get all the carries to similar power levels so that you can at least have fun when you're playing it. And the secondary goal here was to really fine tune the augment distribution to make that feel better. That said, I don't think it'll end up perfect after this patch. We're still, having a lot of learnings with augments. But this should get us in a much better spot, and we'll continue to, watch from there and see what feels bad, what feels good, and how to improve that whole distribution.
Yep. Cool. Well, let's jump into it and start talking about it because we got a lot to go through today. So right off the bat, one quick change. We're nerfing Tome of Traits just a little bit. The breakpoint is basically increasing by 1. Should be a little harder to get the exact emblem you want. Just a very minor nerf. Honestly, most players probably won't even notice it. But this really addresses the abuse cases where you're running the Lulu plus Corky to get exactly what you want. Very high chance. So we're just kind of hitting that a little bit.
Yeah, honestly, what we want out of the tome is for you to, use it and get something to play around, not really for you to manipulate it to the best you can and try to get what you want. Just, trying to, with this whole tailoring, our main objective here is to make sure that you don't you get completely screwed and get all bad options. But yeah, definitely don't want, not the intention for you to manipulate it as much as you can.
Yep. All right. On the trait side, Bodyguard has definitely been a little bit of a lackluster frontline. Some of the champions, but also some of the power of the trait. You're not seeing many Last Whispers, and we're kind of glad that we're not in a spot where everyone's having to build Last Whisper, which is why I'm glad we built this shield lever. So we're just going to buff their starting shields, which basically means bodyguards get to start a little tankier, hopefully making them a bit more of an appealing frontline compared to the bruiser frontline that we're seeing a lot right now.
Yep. Mainly just buffing them so that it's mainly we're buffing the HP so that not or the shield, sorry, that so that they're not just really sharp counters against AD. I think if it becomes bodyguard meta, Last Whisper might still become relevant. We're not saying that by buffing this we're making sure that you don't need to build Last Whisper, but
Yep.
This should just help the trait in general.
Cool. You want to talk Chemtech?
Yeah, Chemtech has been performing really well this set. I think the comp is really easy to get online early on and put together. Even for when you go deeper into 7 Chemtech, it gets really powerful. Especially with stuff like Chemtech Unity, where it grants all of your units Chemtech. We have some changes to that later too, but this has just been a really strong trait. 20% damage reduction multiplied by your defenses is a lot. So we're reducing that to 15%. It's still going to be really powerful. Damage reduction isn't accessible anywhere else. It's just available through the trait. So we think it'll be really strong still, but definitely needs a nerf. Chemtech is overperforming.
Yep. All right. On the Enchanter side, generally we were seeing Enchanter struggle a bit, though I will say post B patch that has changed a bit. So these numbers may get adjusted. We'll have to wait and see. But basically, enchanters were never really the MR counter like mystics were, which was kind of intentional, but we want it to be a little bit better, so we're buffing the magic resist across the board. And then in addition, 3 and 4 enchanter wasn't really giving you those extra shields and heals that we were really quite hoping for, especially with some of these enchanters not quite being as shieldy and healy as, say, Janna was. So we're upping those numbers a little bit as a way to buff the healing and shielding output of champions like Senna and Morgana.
Yep.
Cool. Enforcer. So, Enforcer, I'm not going to lie, we're not really happy with where Enforcer is. It's kind of anti-fun. It's blocking out a lot of traits because it's very easy to just slot in Sejuani plus Vi, or throw in Jace plus Vi, and you just get this free 4-second stun. 12.6, we're likely going to adjust Enforcer even more, but as a short-term solution, we're going to make Enforcer just a little less appealing, so it's only a 3-second stun instead of a 4-second stun. Because again, right now it's just kind of happening automatically. People aren't really opting into it, and so with it being free, it doesn't really need to be quite as powerful as it is now.
Yeah, Wit is cringing right now as you say free, but yeah, basically it's just so accessible and it's so powerful. So we're bringing it down. But as Mort said, we are working on tuning it some more for the next patch.
Yep. All right. The Innovator Dragon. The Dragon has kind of fallen off. It's not really as powerful as we want it to be. But the problem is a lot of the budget was in the crit chance and how it interacted with Infinity Edge. If you had an Infinity Edge Jace 2 with the Dragon, you were outputting so much damage because of the way this crit chance interacts with Infinity Edge. So we're taking that out so that we can put some power back in the Dragon for all the other cases. So now what it says is instead of giving you 75% crit chance, it says you will always crit if able, which is functionally the same thing for every non-Infinity Edge user, because it just means you'll have 100% crit rate. It just means you don't get that converted into crit damage if you have an Infinity Edge. So basically, if you're running 7 Innovator and Infinity Edge, this is a nerf. If you're not, this doesn't change anything. By doing that, we can up the spell crit damage that you get from the Dragon, so your team will do more damage, and the Dragon gets to do a bit more damage as well with his lightning ability. So should be a buff to the Dragon overall.
Yep, and just we are buffing the lightning damage from 500 to 600. Not expecting the Dragon to be your primary carry still, but we'll be doing a lot more damage and should feel better basically in your damage charts.
Yep. All right. On the 1-cost champion side, Brand is certainly I don't think he really worked out. He's not really an exciting 1-cost. You're not like, oh, sweet, I got an early Brand online. I've seen it be okay in Hyper Roll, but that's about it. So we are going to buff Brand across the board. 1, 2, and 3-star gets about a 10% damage buff. Should be pretty good to make him like an option in the early game. VIP, though, was kind of already doing enough. Sorry, not VIP, but the second hit was doing a lot. So we're only buffing the second hit at 1-star. So this is just, it should be a buff to Brand overall, though, and make Brand an exciting carry early.
Yeah, it helps with his consistency in outputting damage because he has to cast a second time to do a lot of damage, and now his first cast will just do a little bit more damage. If you kill that unit, he just gets to cast the first time again on a different unit and deal 10% more damage.
Yeah. Jarvan's spell is very powerful, and we like that. We like that Jarvan has this really cool spell that gives your team a bunch of attack speed. That's sweet. We do want to make you work for that spell a little bit, though. So we're lowering his attack speed, and we're raising his mana cost, so it's not going to quite happen as soon unless you're willing to invest in that Jarvan to get that spell out. So basically, like the spell being powerful, you got to work for it a little bit harder.
Yeah, Jarvan was also casting a bit early into fights and granting your whole team that attack speed, which is really powerful. But also, as a striker, early game, Jarvan was actually outputting a lot of damage, and so by nerfing his attack speed, he kind of cements him more into like the utility tank-ish type role rather than a damage output role. And also, this addresses Hextech. Hextech got nerfed in the B patch, but Hextech is still pretty powerful in the early game. So this brings it down a little bit, and we'll be making adjustments to eventually make the basically scaling of Hextech better.
Yep. Nocturne. This is okay. So interestingly enough, Nocturne has a bug on live right now where he does not scale with AP. So we fixed that bug. It's not usually going to be a buff unless you're willing to go like Death Cap Nocturne, which not that many people do. But if you do put AP on Nocturne, he'll be a little bit better if you're running like an Arcanist or something like that. In addition, though, there was an issue with his 3-star scaling that we kind of screwed up on. If you math it out, the damage per second actually went down at 3-star, which isn't great. So what we're doing is fixing that so that 3-star Nocturne should feel like an actual buff, where not only do you get the longer stun, but you're actually doing more damage per second. So Nocturne should feel a bit better at 3-star. And then a very slight nerf at 1-star, just because he was outperforming a little what we wanted for him being that strong assassin, and just a slight nerf there.
Yep. I had built a Death Cap Nocturne and was sad to see that it did not deal extra damage. But now my AP Nocturne will destroy backlines. I'm very excited.
Perfect. You want to take Twitch?
Yeah, Twitch has been performing really, really well in our data. In the meta, 3-star reroll Twitch is a strong menace that scales well into the late game. So we're tuning Twitch down, bringing down his AD spell percent at 2 stars and 3 stars, 2-star and 3-star, and then we're bringing his spell base damage down at 3-star, just a little bit. But we're bringing up the 1-star spell base damage just so that, if you have him as a splash, you're not using him as your carry, he can dish out a little bit more damage and round that out a little bit.
Yeah, interestingly enough, I don't know that this is going to change too much. He'll definitely hit a little less hard when he casts his spell, but a good 3-star Twitch was just autoing really hard anyway, and that's not really being changed here. So I do expect this comp to still be viable, just maybe not quite as easy to play as it is now.
Yep.
Cool. On the 2-cost side, Ashe. Ashe is an interesting champion because if you can get her to 3-star, she's actually quite good, can output a lot of damage, but man, it's painful to get there. And I think 1 and 2-star Ashe is just not great. Ashe is supposed to be one of our premier carries that you can get in the early game and is exciting to itemize. So we're going to buff that. Now she shoots 8 arrows at all levels. So this should be a pretty sizable buff, allowing her to hit more targets. And in addition, we're increasing the range of her spell. She's a sniper, should be able to take advantage of that. So now her spell was already going as far as her range. So if you put RFC on her, that spell would go even further. But we're increasing that by 1 more hex. So she can shoot even farther, hitting more targets, and should make her a little bit better to play.
Yeah, Ashe was just it's like a really awkward carry to play and just didn't feel great. She would miss her, her ult a lot. And so by doing this, rounding up both the spell arrows and the additional range, she should feel a lot better to play, and should feel like a very strong carry throughout the game.
Yep. All right, Rek'Sai. I'm not gonna lie, Rek'Sai was a bit of a miss when we launched with Rek'Sai. Being a 3-trait bruiser allowed for a lot of flexibility, and in addition, being a striker whose counter is armor, being able to shred all the armor of any target they faced didn't really work out, wasn't really healthy for the game, was kind of shooting down bodyguards and enchanters pretty hard. Now we B-patched that as sort of a temporary stopgap, but this gets Rek'Sai a little closer to what we want, which is a little bit more of that extra frontline, not so much of a damage carry. So she gets a little bit of armor and MR. Her spell damage no longer scales with AP, but her heal does. So every time she bites, she heals, no longer steals any resistances. But if she bites the same target a second time, the heal is much larger. So if you're willing to, for example, put tank items on Rek'Sai, maybe a Rek'Sai 3, and then they bite the same target twice, they get a lot of healing. This can be really good in like an Elderwood mutant comp, for example. But hopefully, we do expect that Rek'Sai will not be a premier 2 cost. That is kind of intentional. That's the tax she pays for having 3 traits. But this should help her identity be a little healthier for the game.
Yeah, and overall, this is kind of an identity shift from what we've seen with Rek'Sai. She won't be the, IE Bloodthirster damage carry. She's more of a tanky drain tank. This is, so, the items that you're going to want on her are going to change. You can experiment with that and see what works best. But basically, as Mort said, you want her to, repeatedly bite a unit, keep herself alive, and so that she can continue taking damage so that your backliners can dish out the damage.
Yep. All right, 3-cost side. Echo, we nerfed him a little bit in the B patch, but he does need a little bit more. The fact that he very, very quickly into a fight, especially if you have 1 or 2 tier items, instantly slows the attack speed of the enemy, increases the attack speed of your team, and has 3 traits, and often then applies Morello, a very common itemization on him, was just a little much utility for this 3-trait champion. So we're slowing that down a bit. We still expect Echo to be good. We don't want to change that, but slowing that down just a bit.
Yep.
Cool. Gnar, we increased the range of his Mega Boulder so that he can throw that a little farther, hopefully not miss quite as often. Should be a nice quality of life change for Gnar.
Yeah, with this one, he's still going to target the farthest unit within 3 hex ranges. That doesn't change, but now the boulder will fly farther. So rather than stopping at that unit, it will usually go further. And so with good angling, you can actually more reliably hit the backline. Gnar already does a lot of damage, and so now that the spell travels further, he can ultimately deal more damage and be more of a reliable carry, which is at least our goal. Which at least is our goal here, yeah.
Yeah. Lucian. Lucian was meant to be a premier 3-cost champion. If you get this guy in your shop at 2-1, you're supposed to be excited, especially if you have like a blue buff and some AP items. Wasn't really working out like that unless you had like 4 Hextech. He was kind of being carried by the Hextech trait, and then he would fall off. Or if you tried to just play him as like 2 or 3 twin shot, he would just kind of dash in and kind of get himself killed. So it really wasn't working out. Yes, there were builds that did well with him in the late game with like 3-star Gangplank, but overall, he just wasn't quite that early game carry we wanted him to be. So we're buffing his survivability with some HP and armor and MR, and very slightly buffing his damage. This should hopefully, again, the goal here is that you see a Lucian 2-1, 2-2, kind of like Kindred back in the old days. You're excited for this. You're like, sweet, I get to play some early Lucian.
Yep, and with the defensives buff, the HP and the armor and MR, he dashes around a lot, gets into trouble. Being overall tankier will help him survive a little longer. Maybe be able to sneak away with a little bit of health, dash away, and continue dishing out damage.
Yep. All right, Malzahar. You want to take this one because it hurts me to talk about it.
Malzahar is a crank. That's how we describe it. Malzahar is very strong. He's performing really well. He's usable in a lot of different builds. He's a great item holder to help you hold items in the mid game before you transition into your late game carries, or you play him as a 3-star and he's really, really strong. So we're tuning him down, not that much, mostly at 3-star because the mutant Malzahar Astro or the Synaptic Webs build basically is really strong. But other than that, we're nerfing him just at 1-star a little bit, 25 damage and 50 damage at 2-star, which is also less than 10%.
Yep. He really is super powerful, obviously a favorite of mine, but the fact that like you get that first cast and he gets that very first cast quick with some AP, he can easily eat through 2 targets. In a way, he's often more powerful than like Caitlyn in that regard. You get that damage as it jumps to the next target. So yeah, he did need to be brought down. He was just kind of the best 3-cost carry if you could get it.
Yep.
And then finally, Morgana. Morgana, we're doing a bit of a shift here. Morgana is meant to be a premier tank. If you, again, get a Morgana early in your shop, you should be happy about this. Instead, what we've seen is there are Morgana builds that work, but they require her to be 3-star. And when she's 3-star, she's a terror, that's for sure. But at 2-star, it was kind of rough, and 1-star, it was really rough. You couldn't really use her as a tank. Kind of reminds me of Vex, for sure. So we're buffing 1-star quite a bit, 2-star a little bit, and we're actually nerfing 3-star. So this should level out Morgana a bit and make her a little healthier. And keep in mind, this is also in conjunction with those Enchanter changes you saw earlier. So if you're willing to invest in a Morgana Enchanter comp, she should be that really good frontline.
Yep, Morgana is going to serve as a very strong frontline after these changes. Or at least that's what we expect.
Yep. All right, 4-cost. Ahri. Ahri has definitely been pretty hard for people to play. Shout outs to Frobe for trying to like figure out the optimal build and things like that.
Saw that video.
Yeah. But generally, we're pretty happy with where Ahri's damage is, but we agree that she is too hard to play and has some really weird cases. So we're making 2 changes. The first is that she gets 30 mana to start with, meaning that like you don't have to have a blue buff on her to get that first cast. Shojin should now be a viable option as well, so that you can just go auto first cast and get that ramp going pretty quick. So that should open up some itemization. And then secondly, we're lowering the angle between orbs. This should allow her to shotgun and be a little bit more effective against single targets, and not necessarily just whiff a bunch of wide AoE orbs. This should feel like an improvement to Ahri, so hopefully this will make her easier to play without just cranking her damage.
Yeah, I want to elaborate a little more on the angles. So basically, currently, as she ramps up, she hits more units more reliably, but usually deals only 1 orb of damage to her primary target. With this change, she'll more likely shotgun that first unit and the units next to it with more orbs. And as she gets to like 3 or 4, she'll more like spread out a lot more, basically. So that's when she starts ramping up and dealing a lot more damage. But this helps her in the as the fights ramp down towards the the 1v2s, the 1v3s. Ahri will more reliably be able to kill those units with every cast. And with the other change, it's just to make it less punishing to not have blue buff. Shojin and blue buff will both give Ahri 3 autos to cast. Blue buff is obviously better with Syndicate because she can take damage, so that she doesn't actually have to auto 3 times. She'll just gain 20 mana back. But it reduces the gap between those two items, and it makes it a little bit more flexible for whatever items you're given throughout the game.
Yep. All right. Alistar. I'm not gonna lie. I'm sad we have to ship this change. I really wish we
Yeah.
didn't. I think Mad Cow is a hilarious name. Props to whoever named that one. But the reality is, and we saw this with Scion in the past, we're really not okay with a Colossus who is CC immune being a primary damage champion. So unfortunately, we are going to have to nerf the damage here. We're nerfing the spell damage because that's not Alistar's role. I hate that we're doing this because I like the fun builds. Just if it gets out of hand, it's going to be crazy, and we really don't want to see a CC immune damage champion that heals up instantly having no counterplay. We need to make sure it has counterplay, and so sadly we have to do this.
Yeah, it really sucks, but literally nothing you can do against this unit. You can't CC them, and then they hit you for thousands of damage and heal back to their 3,000, 4,000 health, and it gets once it gets out of hand, like you really can't do anything about it. So with these Colossus units, we really have to tune down their the damage output.
Yep. Braum, we had nerfed him on PBE to lower that CC, to try to lower the amount of CC in the game. Unfortunately, it just made Braum not a very desirable unit. He was the worst performing 4-cost over the last patch, especially being a bodyguard. So we're bringing him back up a bit. Not quite to what he was in Gizmos and Gadgets, but still gets that 2.75 stun duration. Should hopefully make Braum a good premier frontliner again.
Yep.
Cool. Draven. So after the B patch, VIP Draven has been doing very well, and we're really happy to see that. That's what he's meant to do. But have you tried playing non-VIP Draven? It is awful. It is just atrocious. So we're fixing that. We're going to make sure that the gap between VIP and non-VIP is not quite as wide. So first off, Draven is finally a 4-range champion. Kent, I know this pained you to put in.
Yeah, we debated on this change, the 3 to 4 range, for a long time. I was very against it. Mort was very for it. Eventually,
yeah, it's not as easy as that, right? Because it makes him less unique. For sure, but makes him easier to play, which is good.
Yeah.
So now he'll be 4 range, which should make him easier to play. And innately, he'll get 25% of the armor ignore instead of 0 to 50. So now it's 25 to 50. So non-VIP Draven, still weaker, still going to have to walk up after the 4 range, still only has 25% armor ignore, but shouldn't feel like a dead champion by comparison.
Yep, this gap is reduced basically by half, so it's it should be a lot better for you to play non-VIP Draven, but you'll still want to chase that VIP Draven, and they'll still, if you hit it, you'll still be very excited, and the bonus is still very powerful.
Yep. Vi has been very, very strong, so we're nerfing her a bit. It's pretty straightforward. Vi is a very good frontliner, very flexible with items, can pretty much use any combination of AP or tank items out there. Just doing a little bit too much damage for how tanky she is, so we're just lowering that a bit.
And she did so much damage without items, tuning her down.
Cool. On the 5-cost side, Galio gets a very slight buff. Just gets more HP scaling on a spell. Very slight. You want to go Warmogs, Galio, and see how much... No, I'm just kidding. Don't do that. But it'll just be a little more base damage on the spell, so...
Yeah, and for this change, we want to lean into the whole, you can build HP and get a little bit more damage. It's not going to be your primary carry, but we also didn't want to give, base Galio, just up his base damages and have him be another Alistar. We just want, you can lean into this and play this as if, it's fun and it'll deal more damage as a secondary damage dealer, but not this in the same way as IEJG, and you just put 3 Social Light and see if you can wipe the board. He might still be able to do that, though.
Yep. And then finally, Tahm Kench. Tahm Kench has been underperforming a little bit, struggling with things like Verdant Veil, the Colossus, QSS, things like that. We really don't like that he's so hard countered by these items. So we're raising the damage that he would do to CC immune targets from 35% of the base to 50% of the base. And so this is a pretty sizable buff against these situations. Hopefully should make him really good and, again, not so hard countered.
Yeah, Tahm Kench just often run into situations where he just gets stuck on a unit forever, and so this makes that feel a little bit better. Being able to bite instantly for 50% damage is really good, but you still suffer the loss of you can't farm items or gold off of that unit.
Cool. All right, items. Bramblevest, you want to talk about this one?
Yeah, Bramble Vest has for a long time been a super hard counter to crit damage. We've seen assassins, other than I know Twitch and Talon reroll have been successful recently, but assassins are still kind of difficult to play outside of that. If you play Kha'Zix, you never really go more than that, and if you play other melee carries, you often want to build IE, and it's hard countered by Bramble Vest. If you ever run into a Bramble Vest VIP Leona, you know how that feels. So we're reducing the crit damage reduction here so that it's not as hard countery. It'll still be extremely strong against crit. It's still kind of the item to build if you want to counter crit, just not as sharp as it used to be. And in compensation for that, we're upping the reflect damage a little bit. So when you build it, especially in the early game, you'll be able to dish out a little more of the passive damage when you take damage.
Yep, should be a lot healthier. If we have to compensate it with more base armor or something like that, we can. But again, just losing 100% of your 300% crit damage was just so hard countery. So fixing that a bit.
Yep.
Cool. Mistral. So radiant items, back in the day, you only got one and it was kind of a budget. But here, when it's through an augment, it's a lot of power. And I gotta say, losing a champion for 10 seconds is really painful, especially because this is tied to Future Sight 2. So Future Sight 2 being, hey, I know exactly who I'm going to face, and I'm going to hit their carry for a 10-second stun, was way too powerful. Future Sight 2 was overperforming. So we are nerfing that down to 8 seconds. Still very strong, just not quite as devastating.
Yep. 8 seconds of CC is still a very long time. 10 seconds was basically enough for the fight to end. And so we're just cutting that down by 2 seconds. Yeah.
Yep. Sunlight Cape, overperforming a bit. So we're just nerfing it down. It'll still burn 90% of your health. It is a big nerf here, but the item was doing very well. So
yeah, and keep in mind this is with a larger burn radius. Also, like the unit can hit farther away than regular Sunfire Cape, so it'll still be very strong. Just way too strong as it currently stands. So.
Yep. And then finally, Zhonya's Paradox. Of all the Ornn items, this was the one that was underperforming the most by kind of a large margin, actually. So we're buffing it up quite a bit. Honestly, if we have to go more, we will. But it gets 5 more AP, 15 more armor and MR, and an extra half second of invulnerability duration. My guess is, honestly, this is a bit light. But again, we don't want to overswing too hard and have people in vulnerability for 5 seconds or something like that. So if we need to give it more stats later, we will. But this should make Zhonya's a little bit more of a appealing choice.
Yep.
Cool. Okay, augments. This is a long list. I'm not gonna go into each one of these in detail. We'll be here for hours if we do. But generally, what you're seeing here is an overall reduction in power. I think a lot of the combat augments, especially, ended up a lot stronger than we intended. Again, our goal was not that there were more powerful augments. It was that there were more augments of the same power as before. We were not trying to power inflate, so you're seeing a lot of that here. And then in addition, some new augments, some fixing of augments, some buffing of a few that needed it, some tier shifting I'll go over real quick, but that's kind of high level. Kent, anything else high level before I just read through the list?
No, I think you covered it.
Cool. All right, well then the quick list is Battle Mage gets nerfed, Chemtech Unity, super strong, especially with Chemtech being so strong, moving up to tier 2. Concussive Blows, same thing, moving up to tier 2, but gets a cooldown reduction to compensate. Cyber Implants 3, the HP now matches all the other cybernetic variants. For some reason, this was 100 HP off. Fix that. Disintegrator, combat powered down. Electrocharge, combat powered down. Luden's Echo, combat powered down. Force Score gets a bit of a buff. It can only appear at 3/3, I believe, right, Kent?
Yes.
Yep. So you get 4 cost champions now. So you can look at it as 16 gold, which hopefully makes it a little bit better if you want that option. High 5 is back. It was disabled on PBE because it was such a bad augment. Now that we fixed it, we can bring it back. It only appears on 4/6, but it is 5 random 5 cost champions. Very high chance maybe you get to a 2-star 5 cost here. Hopefully that's an exciting option. Speaking of exciting options, Second Wind 3 was not exciting. That's just gone. Tiny Titans actually gets buffed. This one kind of blows my mind a little bit. So no more Mr. 135s. Now you got to get Mr. 140s. And then Woodland Trinket was a little underperforming, so we're giving it 50 more health on the clones.
Yeah, only thing for me to add, I think Chemtech Unity, all the Unity augments started out as tier 1. We quickly realized that these augments aren't all equal in power. Some of them provide actually way more benefit than others, and some are easier to play around than others. And some, a lot of them you want to play around the 3, 4, and 5 trait breakpoints. It's stronger with stuff like Chemtech and less strong with things like Hextech. Unless you have another kind of Hextech augment to go with it. There's a lot of exceptions, but overall, Chemtech Unity was way stronger than the other Unity augments, and so we're bringing it up to tier 2.
Nice. All right, small side, Twin Shot. Twin Shot has been finding success, but going for 4 or 5 Twin Shot doesn't really feel worth it. So we're just making 4 and 5 Twin Shot a little bit more worth it. 5 more AD at 4, 20 more AD at 5. Makes it really feel like a chase trait.
Yep.
Small champs. Corki and Lulu. This is a buff to Yordle for sure. It kind of needs it, but also Corki, kind of like Ashe, is meant to be a premier carry. Isn't really feeling like that. Not a lot of people excited to get an early 2-star Corki. We want to change that so that gets a bit of a buff. Lulu, kind of one of the worst units in the game, let's be real. So Lulu gets a bit of a buff to help keep your team alive. That should be nice. Tryndamere overperforming a bit, especially at 3-star. So 3-star gets kind of a sizable chunk here, but 1 and 2 get a very slight nerf, only to his spin damage also. So he'll still be autoing just as hard. Jin 1, the difference between Jin 1 and Jin 2 was way too high. So Jin 1 gets a buff to his spell. And then finally Kha'Zix. We still have the old spell name from set 2, which was Arid Assault, which made sense when he was Desert. He's not Desert, he's Mutant, so it has been renamed to Void Assault.
Yep, nothing to add here.
Cool. Jinx. Jinx is doing pretty close to well, and people are starting to figure out how to play her. But she sometimes does die a little too quick for what we want, so we're giving her just a little bit more armor and MR to make her more survivable if you want to go one of those Bloodthirster builds or something like that. And then Zeri just needs a tiny bit more damage, very slightly, so we're giving her 5 more AD.
Yep, Jinx armor and MR buff because she has plot armor, so it thematically makes a lot of sense.
Nice.
Yep.
Is that an Arcane Season 2 spoiler?
I don't know, is it?
Items. Radiant Spark, a little bit of a nerf, another overperformer. Edge of Night and Brink of Dawn both get buffed very slightly. They just trigger a little earlier, so you get to enjoy that extra attack speed a little bit more. Static Shiv, very good item right now, especially when slammed at 2-1. It's kind of ridiculous if I'm being honest. It's really good for that MR shred, but it's also providing a bit too much damage, so it gets a bit of a nerf. And then the Collector was underperforming a little bit. We want this to be an item that is exciting to get as an Ornn, so just buffing it very slightly.
Yeah, overall, we're seeing a lot of damage come from items, combat damage come from items and augments and things like that, so we're tuning a lot of that down, which is why you see Static Shiv come down. Covalent Spark was a really strong choice. We chose not to touch Ionic Spark, but that's another source of combat damage that we're watching closely.
Yep. On the augment side, so you want to take this? This is a lot of your work.
Yeah, sure. So a lot of the work here in small, it doesn't change the power level of the augments, but mostly to make the augment choices feel better when you're offered augments at certain stages of the game. That was the goal here with a lot of these, and I'll just run through them pretty quickly. So Battle Mage and Knife's Edge, I'll put those two together. Basically, they can't be offered if you're playing certain comps. Battle Mage with Snipers, Knife's Edge with Arcanists, Scholars, Snipers, and Enchanters. When you have those on your board, you're typically not going a comp that can use this, and so it's kind of a dead option a lot of the time. Removing that so that you don't feel that you don't feel bad there anymore. Dominance can only appear if you're on a 2+ win streak. It used to appear if you're on a win streak period. So if you just won your last one, you can be offered dominance. Not anymore. You need to be on a 2+ win streak. Golden Gifts can only appear on 3/3. Treasure Trove can only appear on 1/4. Treasure Trove 3 can still appear on 3/3, but that one is a prismatic, slightly stronger, and so we're letting that appear on 3/3. But the other two options you can only get it early on. Realize that players aren't too excited about getting these orbs on 3/3, and so we want to remove that from the pool. Triforce, you can only get this if you have 2 or more 3-cost champs in play. We didn't want to go too tight on the restriction here so that you just basically never see Triforce, but want to make sure that if you aren't playing towards Triforce, you won't be offered it as often. And the last thing is Double Trouble. slight nerfs across the board. It's very, very powerful. We're just tuning everything down by 5, all the bonus stats down by 5.
Yep. One thing to note about these requirements is please remember they don't apply to 1-4. So please don't report to me that, hey, I got Battle Mage on 1-4 and I wasn't playing 2+ snipers. 1-4 still uses basically random generation of augments. These mostly apply to 3-3 and 4-6, unless otherwise stated, like golden gifts can only appear in 3-3, which means it will never appear in 1-4, for example.
Yep. Oh, and just one more thing to clarify on the whole restrictions. We're not trying to offer you, the 3 best choices you can see in every shop. That shouldn't be your expectation. It's more just, what do I see that just like, I feel like I can literally never take this. This feels really bad. We're trying to reduce the amount of time, reduce the amount of situations where that happens. And that's the goal here.
Yeah, and I want to be really clear on that too, because certainly what people, when we get a lot of reports on like, look at this shop, there were no valid choices, when actually there were. Admittedly, with the augment system, we're still really kind of discovering exactly what we want the distribution system to look like. I think it's going to be pretty, everyone's got their different opinions. Some people only want generic augments in 1-4. Some people don't want anything that's even slightly suboptimal. Our goal with the system is going to be to continue to increase game-to-game variance. So don't expect like a ton of these kind of rules in the future, but we are trying to kind of test the waters with some of eliminating these obvious pain points.
Yep.
Cool. Other things. In Double Up, new feature added. Team chat is here. So chat will now only default to your partner. You can still do /all to send messages to the whole lobby. But now if you're a solo queue Double Up player, you can actually just chat to your partner. So that's pretty cool.
Shift enter works too. Shift enter goes to all.
Okay. I learned today. And then hyper roll. There was an issue where some games you would get fewer than the intended minimum number of components. This would apply to all players, so at least it was fair. But it wasn't really fun playing a game where you just had way less items than you're supposed to. So those have been fixed. Sweet. And then finally, bug fixes. Holy crap, there's a lot. Not even going to say there's all of them, but let's go through these real quick. Stacking Triforce 2 and 3 gives the proper amount of mana. Recombobulator spawns its magnetic removers in the top left corner like it's supposed to. Archangel's Embrace 2 is now just called Archangel's Embrace because there's only one. Radiant Banshee Claw's tooltip now specifies it blocks up to 600 ability damage, similar to normal. Fixed a bug where Tom Kench would still consume and deal damage to units affected by Silco's unstable concoction. Enforcer no longer detains a unit with Radiant Quicksilver or units affected by Radiant Zephyr. Warwick with Mutant Emblem no longer deals more damage than intended. The patch rundown's coming out on Sunday. If you want to go test this out, have fun with it. Fixed an issue where Yordle mana cost would not always update immediately as players switch between Yordle 3 and 6. Tom Kench no longer stuns and deals damage to enemies who have escaped his stomach with Edge of Night. Fixed an issue where Cho'Gath Colossus health wouldn't activate the first time he's placed on the board. Silco will no longer cast Unstable Concoction on a target that's in Tom Kench's stomach. Luden's Echo will no longer deal 0 damage the first time a unit is put onto the board. Thanks, Leduc. Hextech, Debonair, and Striker trait augments can no longer be offered after picking Built Different. And Innovator Soul will now actually appear like it's supposed to. So a lot of bug fixes. Like I said, still more to do, but good amount of them here.
Yep. Let's see.
Any you want to
a
cover?
lot of these. Well, yeah, there's a lot. I don't think there's anything to add. Don't play Warwick with Mutant. Don't do it.
Well, it was only the Void Mutant too, right? So
yeah.
But or at the very least, go look up the YouTube videos. They're out there. So
yeah,
pretty funny.
It's really funny, but scary.
Yeah. Okay, so that is it. So one thing to note here is because we're still kind of playing catch up from like the B patch and stuff, there may still be some changes in our A patch, which is what we'd call when we patch before we go live. As always, check my Twitter for any differences from this rundown to that. Then the patch goes live on Wednesday, at which point we'll let it sit for a week. There may be a B patch afterwards if necessary. And then that's it until March 30th for 12.6. So this is a longer patch. So a lot of competitive things will be played on this patch as well. I know the Innovator Cup, at least in NA, is happening next weekend. So yeah, a lot going on. But again, we're trying to get the game to a pretty stable state pretty quickly. So if anything seems off, let us know.
Yeah, what we're seeing right now, even before we ship this patch, the meta is starting to settle in a decent spot. We're again, as we said in the beginning, we're trying to open up as many ways to play as possible. I'm going to closely monitor that and try to make sure that's true throughout the patch. And if we need to, we'll do that B patch that Mort mentioned. But yeah, as usual, give us feedback. We have many channels that are open. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, many direct channels that don't involve things that are longer. So,
I mean, that's a channel also, well, right, Mort?
No,
I
no.
know, yeah. That's not, yeah.
All right. That's going to do it from us. Hopefully, you guys continue to enjoy Neon Nights. Let us know. Otherwise, that's it for now. Until next time, take it easy.